Breathing in diesel exhaust fumes is like walking into a fire without a mask. Over time, those toxins lead to cancer. Protect yourself with MagnaGrip, the easiest, most reliable exhaust removal system that features a true 100% seal to eliminate diesel exhaust fumes. To get free grant assistance, visit magnagrip.com.
All right, guys. Thank you. All right, welcome to the first new battalion chief. Eric is a little under the weather. We wish him hopefully the best. Our prayers are with him. I think it's not serious, but he's with us in spirit. So with me again, I have Tony. And Tony retired from Washington now with
Louisa County, Virginia.
Got it. I'll get it one of these days, Tony. I promise. So
my kids. It's too bad that Eric's not here. My kids watched. They watched one of the last podcasts, and they were like, "Do you just sit there and like listen to their accents?" I'm like, "Yeah, I love the two accents, so it's fun to just be here and listen to them."
All right, so tonight, Tony, what I want to talk about, it's something that happened the other night. I was working in the Marine Battalion, and about 5 a.m, we get a phone alarm for a fire. And, we cover the whole coastline of New York City, and it was out in Rockaway. If you know New York City, Rockaway is like our beach area. And anyway, we had a really strong wind that night. It was like 5 to 10 knots. And, like sometimes, you get these calls. And, we spoke about this earlier about like going with our gut, right? And it just, how it sounded like fire in a private dwelling, 5 o'clock in the morning, phone alarm. And I told the guys, I said, let's hustle it up. It sounds like we got a working fire. It might be on the water. And, I'm doing a size up now. We've talked about coal was wealth. And I'm thinking about the construction, wood frame, all private dwellings, very limited water supply, life hazard very high, weather, lots of wind, lots of exposures, right? Houses are really like on top of each other, right? Street conditions, beach community, not much access for trucks, water supply, weather, we saw coal was wealth. Then we got auxiliary appliances, which would be none, so time of day. So this whole size up is in my mind, and I'm like, they may need the Marine Division for either water supply or a master stream. So we're hustling up, and then first unit gets on scene, give an urgent message, working fire. We need the equivalent of a second alarm. And I'm like, wow, like we got it going. This is really happening, and we're hustling up, and I'm doing a size up in my mind, like where to position the boat, how are we going to get the water supply to these guys. And then we were about 10 minutes into the trip, and the battalion gets on the scene, like the land unit. And he's like, turn everybody around. We got water on the fire, and my impression that it was probably just a couch or a mattress, And I'm thinking to myself, like, I based everything on this one transmission from this company that gave this urgent, request for help, And I think that, like, not only chiefs, but on both sides, that we have to be aware of when we speak on the radio in a public forum, which is the radio frequency, which goes everywhere now, that a lot of people are listening, and they're formulating their plans, and where they're going, and the adrenaline is rushing, and maybe guys are driving faster, and all these like kind of ripple effects. And that, it's really incumbent upon the units that are there first to really paint an accurate picture of what's going on. So like, Tony, I know now that you're like in the rural area, so I'm sure that it's not like being in DC where units are on top of each other, and, you're going to get a lot of help fast. It's even, I think, more important for you.
Yeah. Yeah, I would say the beauty and kind of what you allude to there with the you know the areas. So you know if it comes up at this street, right? You know it's going to be row frames, or you know it might be row houses, or it'll be an H-star style apartment building, right? Depending on where it is. So some of that stuff is already done for you. I think that that's one of the things out here is you don't. It's such a big county that you don't know. You can't concentrate on a neighborhood, right? You might be going over the whole place. So you don't know what you're going to, what kind of building you're going to. So it's very important that first arriving unit paint a good picture. Now, I will go back to that. One of the things I think we miss out on, just like with every other skill that we have to do, you have to practice it. If you want to be good at it, you have to practice it, and you can't wait for the big one, right? You can't just sit back and say, "Oh, I'll be good. I'll be good." No, right? Practice it on medical alarms. If you're going to that every day, practice it on that. Sit around the kitchen table and put the computer up here and do some YouTube videos and practice your size up skills. No, I think it's very important, but even in DC, I think so too, right? Because it can set the tone. It can set the tone, like you said, urgent message. You think the tone is, man, we're going to be doing battle here. So, where was the breakdown there?
Yeah. And I know what it was. And, I have my suspicions now. And, we were all surprised. I mean, the safety battalion is here too. And, they were listening. It's 5:00 in the morning now, so like, everyone's paying attention. Like safety knows they're going.
Yeah.
And, a lot of units, they're coming from a long distance, and it's a very tight community. Like it's all bungalows and houses in the wind. I came very close to giving a report on the radio as I'm going towards Rockaway on the boat. I was going to give a condition of the wind, like because the flags were going, the wind was coming out of the south, and it was actually coming from the southwest, which would have blew it right into the rest of the houses, and I'm ready to give that size up. I said, well, let me just hold up just in case. And thank God I did. But, it's just that I want other firefighters, chiefs, officers to realize that, that radio is an amazing tool.
Yeah.
I mean, that, this is, we have to work, like you said, like practice, like we have to like just work on like kind of visualizing what's happening, right? I've been for the last 37 years when I work, this radio is always on and I'm listening to everything. And I could tell you, I've gotten to the point now where I could tell you just by the tone of the voice of an officer giving a transmission, what's the severity of what's happening. But guys have to really, they have to be aware of not only what they're saying, but how they're saying it.
Yeah.
Like Jim, I tell you, Jimmy from Jim Duffy from Connecticut. I love what he told me one time. He says, Danny, he says, it's like being a duck on a pond, A duck on a pond seems very calm, but inside, his legs are going like a million miles away. And ever since he's told me that, I've always, like sometimes I watch the seabirds, and their legs are going a million miles away, and yet they appear so calm,
Well, I'll go back to a friend of ours and Steve Schaefer, right? And when we talked about the Back Bay incident, right? One of his takeaways was that tactical pause, right? And take the time, and Andy said it, right? Take the time to make the time, but take that little breath, formulate your thoughts, and then get it out, right? So this is a good time to do that. And I think one of the things too is I see a lot of young guys, they kind of want it to sound like a cool transmission, right? And I would tell them, look, airtime is so hard to come by sometimes, right? Especially in the beginning of the incident, that if you get the radio and you've got control of it, take the time and say whatever it is you want to say. It doesn't have to sound cool. It just needs to be paint a good picture. You know, a lot of people want to say, like in DC, we have 2-unit apartment or 4-unit apartment buildings, right? Two on the first floor, 2 on the second floor. Some of them call them 2 up, 2 down. Some call them 2x4s, but whatever, right? Just call it a 2-story apartment building with 4 units, right? I mean, you say what you, it doesn't have to fit into a cool term. You just have to get the word out there and get the information out and set the tone. So I think that, you know, if you get the radio, if you're able to get it, and then take it, use it. Don't ramble, right? You don't want to ramble, but be concise, be complete, make a complete message, and get it out.
Yeah, I know. Today, I was working in my battalion, the 3rd Battalion in the Bronx. My aide Billy was working, and they had a working fire in in a 6-story, and he gave such a great size up. But I know the building, so it's for me. I have the advantage. So, but the way he just painted a perfect picture. You know, he says we got fire in the basement, extended into the alley on the Delta side. You know, we have one line stretched. We have a second line being stretched as a precautionary line. We have trucks doing a search, opening up. You know, and here's the other thing that I think is critical. And I've had disagreements with other chiefs from other cities in the past about this terminology and what we do in New York. And I'm not saying that we're right or wrong or whatever, but there's a few ways we describe a fire. We could say it's either doubtful will hold, which means what you're telling people is that, yeah, we have water on the fire, maybe, but we're not sure if there's an extension or there's exposure problems or what. It's doubtful right now. Or we have water. I get a report from an officer, you know, engine 9-4 to Battalion 3. We have water on the fire, you know, for all visible fires knocked down. Then I'll say, okay, all right, Battalion 3 to the Bronx. We're going to say we're probably will hold. And that means that we're probably going to hold it with what we have. It's not going to escalate to a second alarm. And then obviously the last description would be under control. And that means that we're wrapping it up. You know, it's time to go home. Now, I've gotten the pushback on the doubtful. And the pushback was that, well, you're admitting that you don't have it in hand. I'm like, who cares? Like, you know, like I'm letting the guys know, like you're sitting in your firehouse right now and you're next up on a second alarm. Maybe you better go take a potty break or something, because there's a good chance you're going to be here in about 5 minutes, you know?
I think it's a useful terminology and right, because it can kind of tell your boss, it can tell the people below you that might be on the next alarm, you know, hey, this is what's going on. I can see where someone could have an issue with it, but no, I think it paints a good picture for me, right? There's a good battle going on at this fire. It's probably going to escalate. So yeah, I don't see a problem.
And the other thing that I really feel strongly about, and I'll tell you a story, because I like to make my points with stories, you know. And I was a captain, and I had a brand new Proby firefighter, and it was his first fire. So we get a phone alarm for fire, private dwelling, 3rd floor. I know the buildings; they're all attached, you know, firewall, so there's no extension problems. We pull up. It's out one window in the front, you know, nothing big. And, you know, it's his first fire. So he's really kind of, and I have kind of a hand on his shoulder. He's stretching in line. He's got the nozzle. We get up to the top, you know, call for water, all good. Everything nice and calm. Christian, this is what's going to happen. It's starting to burn through the door now. It's like kind of lapping out a little bit. All good. Plenty of room. The chief comes on the scene and starts screaming. I mean, screaming. He was known for that. He was a screamer. This kid went from being calm. I had to physically hold him now and reassure him, like, it's good. It's all good. Just open the nozzle, knock it back, and we're all good. But, you know, this chief, because he was like rattled, it trickled down to everybody.
Yeah. Yeah. Huh.
Like everyone, like now he's like, there's fire in a cockloft, this. He sounded like a lunatic. And I'm like, dude, I'm right here. I got water on the fire. And then you start second guessing yourself. Well, maybe it isn't a cockloft. I don't know. But you have to be calm. You know what I mean? Calm. Just calm reports,
I think if you go back, you went back and you said, like, again, the terminology, right? The doubtful, will hold, and that kind of thing. One of the things that we don't really, when I was in DC, we didn't have a book of terms to use. And I think, you almost need to have something that says, these are the things that you say. We had a fire, a midday fire. It was, it ended up being, it was a propane tank in the back, and it caught several back porches of the row houses on fire. So the companies in the front, they went to the dispatch address, right? And it was a row house on fire. What they didn't know was that it had extended in the back to several other row houses. So the company in the front, they mark on the scene with this one, and they make entry into that one. The company in the rear, he sees that he thought that he picked the middle building of the three of them that were on fire and said that must be the building that's on fire. And he said, I got fire, and he used the word communicating to the Delta exposure. When, again, that's an unusual word for us. That's not typical DC jargon or lingo, right? It would be extending. That would typically be what we would say. Yeah. So I don't know if, again, you go back and you don't know if that had an impact because he used that word. Did they understand in the front that there might be several row houses on fire? So ultimately, a company went into the exposure, and there was fire on the back porch. They didn't know it. They saw smoke on the second floor. They went up there. Somebody took out a door, and the fire followed them up the steps and pushed them. They all actually, several members got burned. One was burned pretty bad, but they had to come back down the steps. And again, would if they had used extending or something we typically say, would that have helped them to paint the picture and know what's going on in the rear? So again, we don't have like a dictionary. Like this is
what I would suggest for anyone that's listening and they're in a smaller department, and this is what we do in New York. It started just grassroots, like we come up with a script. It's an actual script that my aide carries, and it says at box and 2420. We're using whatever it is, all hands for a fire on the X floor of a certain type of building, blah, blah, blah. We have this line stretched, and it's a script. And if smaller departments could come up with some sort of script and give it to all their chiefs and a lot of them don't have aides, and say, this is the script that you have to follow. This is how, and then get guys used to listening to these certain, like buzzwords, like, extension, or we got fire on top, like if I hear like, okay, we got fire on the top floor and I'm coming in, I'm thinking right away, like, oh, we're going to a multiple alarm. We're going to have extension in the cockloft, and we're going to probably have a few apartments,
Yeah.
So it's really so important to get this terminology down. I know that there's a term, use cans, give a conditions, accents, actions, needs, and that's kind of what that is, like what's going on, what we're doing and what do we need, Yeah,
and I think, again, back to DC, we had that script for our aides who were communicating, right? Because they would be the ones who would talk to dispatch on the dispatch channel, and they would be the ones communicating that status report. But it'd be tough to give like a script to your unit officers. Well, that's where, again, you go to the CAN thing, right? And I know some people have added a U in front of the CAN, so it's UCAN, unit conditions, actions, needs, which is again, they can change it up a little bit, but a good basic information. I do like to follow that.
I love that.
We got a chief here who's like, hey, give me a CAN report. Give me a CAN report. Well, it's not really CAN report. It's in this format, right? It's a report that's in this format. But whatever, as long as we can communicate and get the message out.
I love acronyms, and one of them I use is LODANCE. And that's the report that the officer is giving me in the chief in the street. The location, the occupants accounted for, any delays, apartments on the floor, access. And one time I had this brilliant captain, and I had a lieutenant twice, 2 different fires. And I'm looking at the building, right? And it's huge. It's in the Bronx, we have these big H-type buildings, And the officer, he gave me a report, and he said, we have 3 apartments on the floor. And I'm like, wow. 3 apartments per floor. It was like 100. That means that apartment had to be huge.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And then I had another report, a lieutenant. He's a chief now, soon to be a deputy chief. Gave me a report like that. I'm thinking like there's like maybe 7 or 8 apartments. And he said, yeah, we have like 4 apartments per floor. And this whole wing was going. It was 1 apartment. It had 5 bedrooms. It was 2 apartments combined into 1. That changed my whole attack because it was such a good report. Like I didn't have to figure it out. Like I have a good idea of how many apartments may be on that floor, but like by him like defining the actual layout of the apartment and on the floor just helped me tremendously. Like I don't know, it's just
yeah. Are you guys? Do you guys when you like a sector, right? If you send you got 2 engines and a truck, or you got 2 engines and 2 trucks operating on the 4th floor, and you send a chief up there, do you call them a division? What do you call? Do you call them a sector?
That's the fire. That's the fire sector. Yeah, I do that a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you call it the fire sector?
Yeah, and that's just the way we talk. We may not be NIMS or SIMS compliant, but we're such a big department that we have our own dialect.
Yeah,
and it works for us.
Would you put an officer in charge of that fire sector, or would it have to be a chief?
No, chief. Yeah,
yeah, I like that idea. I wish we could do that, but
you know why? Because the chief, he's not involved in the actual firefight.
Yeah,
he doesn't have responsibilities. Like he doesn't have to be worrying about stretching a hose line or doing a search. He can only focus on stepping back and seeing a bigger picture. And that's what I like about it.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I like that too.
Yeah. Sometimes I feel like I don't want to come across like we have all the answers, but it's just that I think that we've really perfected this whole communication, the way we speak to each other, because, we use a lot of numbers too. It helps, like it cuts down a lot of like verbiage, like I remember when I was a firefighter, I was in the squad. I remember being at this fire one time in Harlem, and one of these firefighters got on the radio, and he just got on this long-winded like report, and all he had to say, what he was trying to say was that he had the bulkhead open, and I could not believe that the lieutenant said back to him, he says, listen, just tell me if you have a problem. I expect the roof to be open. Let me know if you're having a problem. You know what I mean? So I guess the point with that is like, you don't have to go into these long reports about what you did and where you stretched it and how you got there. I think it's more important to let the chief or the officer know if you're having a problem, because I think the expectation is like from you and I, like if I'm in the street and I got a fire on the 3rd floor and I see one of my engine companies stretching a hose line, I'm expecting that line to be at that door charged and move in and start putting the fire out. Now, what I want to know though, if they have a burst length, if they have kinks, if they lost water, if maybe there's fire that they passed, that's something I need to know about. But, I don't need a 2-minute report on that you have water on the fire.
Yeah, again, I think one of the things that was ingrained in our job was that we gave a report really every time, right? You gave a report when you crashed a threshold. You gave a report. If the fire was in a 10-story apartment building, reported to be on the 7th floor, you would give a report on each floor as you went up. Which to me, I think, again, I just tell me if you find something, right? I don't need to hear, because I think we added so much talking to the radio, and you wonder why. Everybody talking on the radio. Well, this is why. So I would kind of give it to my officers and say, call me when you find something, right? I don't need a report, but if you find something, that's what I want to hear. I don't need your progress on every floor. Give me if you're the line, I got a fire on the second floor. Awesome. What are you doing? If you find something on the first floor, obviously I want you to check the first floor before you go to the second floor, but you don't have to tell me every step you're making. I think we sometimes build so much stuff into this that we add talking on the radio.
Another thing I'll tell you that I've gotten very good at over these years, especially I've been a chief like for 15 years now, and being in the squad and all, I can tell you what the conditions are in the apartment or the house just based on the radio report itself. Yeah,
absolutely right. If the guy's in, has got his mask on.
Engine. Now I know he's like totally encapsulated. Yeah. He's in a heavy smoke condition. Yeah, we're searching for the fire, or and I hear this very muffled radio transmission. Yeah, that's got my attention.
Yeah.
I had one about a year ago now. It took my breath away because it was a mayday. It was like mayday, mayday, mayday. But I heard the vibrant alert going off in the background, and it was legit because it was that mayday, mayday. Like in the mask, and he was totally lost. The vibrant alert's going off, and like, oh man, like it's real. So it's not so much what they're saying. It's some stuff around it that's going on that you got to pay attention to. Or another thing, I could be in the street and I hear a report from the roof. All right, ladder so-and-so, 99 roof to command. And I hear the saws going in the background, like, then they're talking over the saws. I know they're cutting away up there,
Yeah.
So,
yeah. And maybe you give them an extra couple minutes, right? I'm not going to bug them right now.
Right.
Yeah.
Here's another one I want to tell you about too, Tony, is I encourage firefighters, especially, but even I'm talking about roof ops, don't make assumptions, right? If you're on the roof, right, we have a lot of buildings in New York that have cock lofts, right? That's that space in between the ceiling and the roof, right? And when we get fire in that void space, it's a problem, and that it really applies to any void, And what I encourage the young guys, I say, listen, if you're on the roof, you open up an inspection hole or whatever you're doing, and you see heavy smoke pouring out, do not say you have fire in the cock loft, because for me that's a game changer. What I encourage, and I'm just using it as one example, but tell me what you see. Just paint the picture.
Yeah.
I just cut a inspection hole, and we got heavy gray smoke pushing out under pressure. Okay, probably do have fire in a cock loft. Or it could be just light, wet, smoke wafting out, like a lazily. Is it under pressure, or is it kind of just, meandering out? That. Just tell me what you're seeing. Don't make any assumptions, because I'm gonna give my report. I may ask for a second alarm.
Right. Yeah.
Based on that report.
But you could also send units to go check out from below, right? Hey, we need to get a unit up there and start pulling some ceiling. Yeah. Yeah,
absolutely. So, so I think, like, I want to go back to something you said earlier, though. When I was a lieutenant, I worked in a pretty busy engine company, and, the engine next to us was just as busy, and, we had a fair share of vacant buildings still at the time. We were in Harlem. And it was kind of funny, but it really wasn't funny. And the dispatchers now, they're like calling the battalion. All right, Manhattan to Battalion. We're loading up the box. We're getting numerous calls, this and that. And I'm in the front seat, and I'm now like, I'm ramped up. My guys are ramped up. The masks are on, and they're checking their air bottle, and like we're going to beat the band, and we're all now waiting like with bated breath, because I think it was even before we had the computers, right? So you did everything by phone, by the handset. And he was just like, yeah, engine so and so, yeah, like very 1075, and I told the guys, I forget it, it's nothing. So I turned the corner, it's out 5 windows, 2 floors of fire. And after I said, what are you doing? The adrenaline's racing, and now it's like, and then it's racing again. It's just like, but he wanted to be that cool, like, I think just tell it like it is, just call it as it is, man. If it's a strike, it's a strike. If it's a ball, it's a ball. Whatever it is, man. Just, don't make it more than it is. Don't make it less than it is. Just give us the story. So much riding on it,
Yeah, no, that's important. And we used to have some of that too, where, the companies would slow down if you said nothing showing. So it made sure that you got the fire, right? Or vice versa, right?
Yes.
We would definitely have some battles like that. We would make sure we were going to get the fire. Absolutely.
It's funny you say that. Back in the day, in the so-called war years in the Bronx, I caught like the kind of end of it. And there was a single engine company that was near us, and they were all by themselves. And I think their motto was like run silent and run deep, so they would pull up, there'd be fire out 3 windows, and they'd say nothing. And then, they didn't care. Guy, my truck and everyone else is just like, it's nothing, and then they turn the corner and there they are stretching the line and fires out 3 windows, so.
I do like that. That's one thing that, and I'm sure I don't know, maybe you guys have perfected it, but you hear guys get on the scene and say heavy fire or heavy smoke, right? And I think that if you can quantify that, fire out 2 windows, fire out 1 window,
I like that. Yeah.
An apartment off or something that you can quantify, because heavy fire is just so ambiguous, and heavy smoke, doesn't necessarily tell me anything other than the building's on fire. If you can give me a little bit better picture to paint it, I like the window thing.
I've gotten caught a few times in my career where I've given a report based on a report given to me, and then I looked like a horse's ass and I actually made a mistake, and I'll own it. Like I told the deputy, I said, yeah, we got heavy. I think what I really meant was that we actually didn't really have heavy fire, but it wasn't just extension. It was like the whole void space was going. So I told them we got heavy fire in the void space. It really wasn't heavy fire. It was like the equivalent of a 20 by 10 room that was fully involved in this void space. What I should have said is it wasn't just light extension. Like, we thought it was just a little extension from the boiler, and it was the whole thing going. And afterwards, he's a friend of mine. He's actually got less time, and he's like, he looks at me, heavy fire? I'm like, yeah, I know. I know. I screwed up on that one, but you're right.
You can definitely ramp things up. I remember a small fire with a company we didn't normally run with, and I was in charge of the truck. And ultimately, it was a dishwasher on fire, and we put it out with the sprayer on the sink, right?
Sure.
It was the first line on the fire, and then the engine company officer gets in there, and he's like, "We need a line in here." It's like, hold on, buddy, hold on. Let's take a tactical pause and evaluate this, because we got it knocked down. We got water on the fire, and we don't have to escalate this, because again, you might have a chief out there that's going to pull the trigger and bring in that second alarm or the working fire dispatch, or, whatever, start sectoring it, going down his checklist, and doing all that when, hey, we can control this. We got it. But, we might do a little bit better size up and see what's going on. you might get them ramped up.
Well, that's it. It's just that, like, yeah, I mean, and another thing that I want to just go back now and touch on something else that you said, and it has to do with that fire in the rear with the identification too. And I haven't done this yet. It's in my toolbox, and I will do it at some point. But we had a fire. We have some attached row frame houses, and sometimes it's a little ambiguous now. What's the fire building? What's the exposure? Or even we have a lot of buildings where I am where in the front of the building, it's, let's say, 2 stories, and in the back it's 3 or 4. So you might have a firefighter in the back say, all right, ladder so-and-so OV to command, we got fire on the 2nd floor. Now he's looking in the back. He's seeing fire out the windows on the 2nd floor, which for me may be just the 1st floor. Or vice versa too. Like we had a fire where one of my lieutenants gave a transmission. He says, "Yeah, we need a line in the exposure." And then they stretched into the whatever it was, Bravo or Delta, whatever it was, but it was actually the fire building because they thought it was you know what I mean? So I said, well, maybe the first thing we should do when we get on scene is say, okay, 425 Main Street is the fire building. Take a spray paint, put a big X on it. I don't know if anyone would have the wherewithal to do that, but to really identify which is the fire building and which is the exposure, because you get 3 or 4 row frames going, and now you got fire in the shaft in the middle. It's in 2 buildings. You got to make one the fire building and one the exposure, just to keep everybody on the same playing field.
No, I agree. I think that and the other thing too is, like, let's say that the guy in the front, right? And we had some of these things where, maybe you have in the front you have you can see a window from the basement, but it's just a window, and you might call that a basement from the front. So you say you got 4 stories in the front with a basement, and you call it 4 stories, right? And then the guy in the rear calls it 5 stories. Or you get the guy that comes in there and he calls that basement a story. So now he's got 5 stories in the front. And then, so now we're having a problem with the same thing. I think that's where the aide can be really, really helpful if he can get out, or definitely the second chief, right? The second chief would be really helpful in what are we going to call how is this thing laid out? And let's establish that, right? And I've heard, hey, look, this is where I live. I live in Prince William County, Virginia. They do a really good job of when they do a size up. Like, again, let's say they go to a 2-story colonial with a basement, 3 stories in the rear, 2 in the front, right? They'll do that size up. I got 3 in the rear. We're going to call it basement 1-2. And then dispatch repeats that. Okay, I copy. You got a 2-story single family dwelling with 3 in the rear. You're going to call it basement 1-2. And it's really good, right? Because it starts that, like you say, paints a picture. It starts it off the right foot, and he established it. Now, if we need to change it, right, then maybe we can change it and the chief will announce that. But he came out and established that, right? The second company coming in can't say, well, I'm going to call it 1, 2, 3. No, it's already called basement 1, 2.
Got it. I like that. Yeah.
That was a really good, and I really hadn't heard that anywhere else until, I guess the last couple of years they've been doing it at my hometown here.
One of my ace lieutenants, the same guy that gave me that phenomenal report about this H-type, with the 4 apartments, he was the civilians called up and said they were on how'd this go again? There was some mix up on the top floor, the 2nd floor. It was a basement, and then there was like a set of stairs that went up right to the 2nd floor. Then there was the 3rd floor, and whatever the report was, he made a beeline for those rooms, and he didn't find the kids. And then the rescue came in, and they went to the floor above. It was actually, there was a miscommunication on identifying what floor. So, to circumvent that, maybe what we do sometimes is, like, you could use the top floor and say, okay, the fire is on 1 floor below the top floor. because the top floor is never going to change. The first floor could be a basement, in the back it could be a basement, it could be, there could be some mix up there, but the top floor is never going to change. So you could say, okay, 2 floors from the top, 1 floor from the top, whatever it may be. And it may alleviate some of the kind of confusion, right?
Yeah, we've had that same issue where it might be easier or a more confirmed thing if you count down from the top.
But I like what you said, Tony. I think what should happen is, I think as soon as the IC gets on scene, he should establish that right away. Like we're calling this. A lot of times, what I'll do, I'll say, the floor above.
Yeah.
The floor above the fire. Like I'll say, okay, my units will call me. They'll say, okay, primary search is negative on the floor above. Well, we'll just say the fire floor above. We don't even have to call them the numbers, because I could see the fire and I could see the floor above.
Yeah.
And that kind of keeps it simple for me too. It's just using, or 2 floors above the fire, or a floor below for some reason if you're down there. But I just did a little drill with the local volunteer company where I live. I have this house out on the beach, and I walk every morning on the beach, and I noticed they were making a renovation. They were doing a renovation on a house on the beach, and on the beach side, it's 4 stories with an attic. If you go up the hill and you go around, it's only 1 story.
Wow.
Well, I questioned the guys, the local fire department. I said, how, what if someone calls up and says, hey, there's a fire in a 1-story private dwelling? Now you're thinking, okay, 1 story. You walk in from that side and the fire is two floors, 2 stories below. You're going above the fire, kind of unbeknownst. Like you.
We can go back to Pittsburgh, right? The Bryceland Street incident. That was a Valentine's Day fire. It was several years ago. It's probably been 20 years now. And that same thing where it was House on the Hill. You might have heard Danny from Pittsburgh. He does a class called House on the Hill. And that incident there, it was 2 in the front, and I want to say like 4 in the rear. And the company went in, and they're like, oh, we're in the basement, but there was actually another floor below them, right? And there was they got lost in the building, conditions changed, and so on. So if hopefully the guys at the beach at your local volunteer department, they know those buildings, right? They know they know those snowbirds, the ones that are going to cause them problems. But we had an apartment in DC where, if you went in, it was like if you went on the 3rd floor, it would be the 3rd. It took you in the 3rd floor, but you also owned the apartment covered the 2nd and 3rd. Where if you went in on the front of the building, it went to the 3rd and the 4th. So it was really offset like this. And fortunately, right, it definitely was. It was one that you wrote about. You put it in your information book, so everybody knew. If you go to it was like 1425. I want to say it was Rhode Island Avenue or something. And it was set like that. It was an odd thing, but fortunately, right, they wrote it down and they passed it on to everybody that went there. You just hope it's not like units coming from another part of town that's going there, because they'll get confused.
We could talk all night about buildings that are like mislabeled, and like one of the biggest problems we have, and you're familiar with it because you have, you've had high rises in DC. One of the biggest challenges we have sometimes is when we have a fire in a high rise, right? We have what we call scissor stairs, right? So they go like this, and then every other floor. So you came in on the 1st floor, you're in the A stairway in the lobby. You come up, now you're in the A stair, you're on this side, then you go up to the 3rd floor. And the standpipe is, let's say, stays in that A stair, but then it alternates A, B, with the standpipe. And what the management companies will do is they'll just make every door that's on that side of the building A. And so you'll get a firefighter say, okay, I'm in the the B staircase on the 5th floor, but meanwhile, you're in the other staircase. And now we're trying to make an attack stair, an evacuation stair. And now these doors are being opened. This is contaminated. It really, so again, communication, right? Miscommunicating the proper stairway. Something very innocuous, very simple, but it happens.
Could be deadly. Yes, sir. Yep. Yeah. Again, the stairwell is important. And I mean, I know that, again, in DC, we had a chief that kind of carried that torch of making the buildings label their staircases. And he was instrumental in that, right? Because they didn't do a really good job. And again, it told them what the exit floors were, where it went, if it went to the roof or didn't go to the roof, right? And labeled each one 1, 2, 3, 4 or A, B, C, D, so that you knew there was multiples. And I mean, it makes a big difference, especially now what we know about smoke control and movement on the high rises.
Yeah.
And really makes a big difference.
Well, where it comes really, really important, like in a multiple dwelling, especially even for a commercial high rise, is that let's say the units take the elevator up, they go 2 floors below, they get out, now they're going to walk up, they open the door, heavy smoke condition, and now here's the standpipe riser, they get on the radio, okay, engine 99 to command, we're going to use the A stair for the attack stairway. Now, that means that the A stairway, is going to be open on the fire floor. So anyone above coming down is going to get smoked. So we want to steer everyone. So we're going to say, okay, if the A stairway is the attack way, by default, the B, the C, or D, or whatever is all going to be evacuation.
Yeah.
Right. And those doorways are going to be maintained closed on that fire floor, so we can keep that smoke free. If that message doesn't get out there, and then firefighters just inadvertently start opening doors, and now we've just made an IDLH for the people coming down the staircase, right? So again, it's communication. Identifying attack stairways and evacuation stairways, right?
I think one other important thing, right, is to confirm like apartment numbers, right?
That's another one. Yeah.
And I've seen, again, typically you expect that if you have a 501, you got a 601, you got a 701, they'll all be above each other. But there's some buildings that don't do that. I think about that. Remember, have you ever seen that May West building in it's outside of Toronto? What town is that outside of Toronto? Another big town. And it's like a twisted building. It's crazy looking. And there's no way that, you got a 101, 201. There's not the same number of apartments on each floor.
Right.
You're not going to be able to do that. And we try to teach people, hey, look, if you're going to 611, go to 5, find 511. So when you go to 6 and it's 0 vis, you can count down how many doors it is from the stairwell. Now you just got to make sure, right, that they do that due diligence as they're going up to check and make sure that it's going to line up like that. But again, if it's not, then communicate that. If it's not what we expect, get the message out so everybody can plan accordingly.
Yeah, no, I like that. That's a great idea because I go on autopilot sometimes. I just assume we use a lot of numbers and letters, right? So in our H-type buildings, it'll be 6A, 5A, 4A, 3A, 2A. They're all on a line, But sometimes the A, here's another one now, which is very peculiar, right? And again, it's communication. We put this on our we call it SIDS, right? So sometimes the buildings will say, okay, well, this is floor A, this is floor B, this is floor C. So you have A1, A2, A3, A4, you know what I mean? You have to know, the labeling system, because you could think like, okay, the dispatcher gets on and says, okay, we got a fire in apartment 6A. I'm thinking it's a top floor fire. It's on the first floor. So again, we have this communication, communicate the numbering or the lettering system of the building, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
So this is the building here. Look at that. Can you see that building, Danny?
My wife would call that
And
the Kachanga building. Yeah.
that's in
Yeah.
Mississauga, Ontario.
Right.
And again, there's no way you're going to have the apartment above be the same thing. So, if you didn't know that, I'm sure the guys have pre-planned that building because it's
Right.
huge and it's, one they probably go to a lot. But, again, take this home. If there's some places you don't go to a lot and you haven't pre-planned it, if you find something crazy, make sure you communicate it and get the message out to the chief and that he can relay it to all the other units that are coming in so that they know what to expect.
We have some newer buildings now that there'll be commercial like on the first 4 or 5 floors, and then it's residential above, or like a big mezzanine or a theater, so you might get a report like, we got fire on 3A. And I'm thinking, okay, well, 3rd floor, portable ladders and whatnot. Meanwhile, it's about 75 feet up, So again, this whole communication on, the whole numbering lettering system of what we're responding to.
Yeah. Yeah, I've seen that, right? Where you get the first floor doesn't count, right? Because it's got shops or something. And your numbering for the apartment starts on the 2nd floor. And you got 101s actually on the 2nd floor. And then they call back and say, I got, fire on the 4th floor, but you're looking, it's on the 5th floor. And you're thinking, oh, we got extension. No, it's just, this is how the numbering went. So they communicate that.
Yeah, I got caught one time in this crazy building. It was so I'm listening to this fire coming in right now, and the dispatcher just got on the radio, says we're getting a couple of calls on this. And the stage is being set right now, because now everyone's getting ramped up, like numerous calls for a fire in the basement. Now, I'm curious, the first unit that's going to come on scene, I'm very curious to hear how he transmits that working fire. Is it an elevated 1075, or just is it a cool hand Luke, like, yeah, we got fire, whatever, And that the stage is going to be set. Like, it's already set right now. Because with the dispatcher just giving that information about the couple of calls on that. That's what they say. We got to get a couple of calls on that. They know. Like, they're talking to the people that are calling. And they're professional. And they know, like, yeah, this is the dispatchers, the old dispatchers used to say, all right, you're going to work, pull up your boots, like,
yeah. Yeah.
So
I think sometimes we have the ones that have their police dispatchers and their fire dispatchers. And again, just talking to police are a whole lot different than talking to the fire department, and I think that sometimes our dispatchers get too involved and they give too much information, right? Like they're bleeding from their head. Well, I can't go any faster. The information you're giving me isn't making me go any faster. So, just give me the important stuff and save the ancillary information for the CAD notes.
Yeah. I think there's you reminded me of a story, and we'll kind of wrap it up with this. And again, there's a few players involved here, right? There's the people calling the dispatcher calling the chief, and then the chief communicating with the firefighters. And I remember I was working in a truck company one night, and everything seemed to be almost like it was a script. Like I worked in 17 truck, and a lot of times we had the old school dispatchers, man. These guys, they knew the job inside and out. In Boston, they call them the Sparks, Buffs, whatever you want to call them. Whatever. I'm a buff. Whatever. I'm into my job. And, there's just like this kind of like, it's almost like a script, like we're going back and forth, and, we're picking up on certain buzzwords, So anyways, a lot of times we get a call, whatever, vacant building, whatever it is, and our office would get on the radio and say, okay, ladder 17 to the Bronx. Do you have any special instructions for the tower ladder? So now the dispatcher should be calling the chief and saying, Chief, I got your tower ladder coming in. Where do you want them? So we're getting kind of ahead of the curve here a little bit, And the deputy would come back and say, yeah, have 17 truck come in on 141st Street and set up on the exposure 2 side, the Bravo side. So eliminates all that time. We go right to the spot. We set the tower ladder up. And now we got fire in between the exposure and the fire building. So I'm working in this truck company one night, and we have one of these dispatchers that they are, they're from the, I don't know what system. Like, I want to say I'm sorry, I'm just trying to, they didn't give the signal yet. Like, they're not the old school dispatchers, So I get on the radio, I'm like, ladder so-and-so to the Bronx. I said, do you have any special instructions for the tower ladder? Now, I know it's burning. I've been listening the whole time. It's a row frames, and the fire's in a cock loft, and it's spreading. It's going very rapidly from second to third alarm. And the dispatcher gets on, and she says, just report into the command post. And I'm like, man, that don't sound right. So, all right, whatever. Like, what she should have done is got on the radio and said, hey, Bronx to Chief, what do you need? I got this truck company come in. And they would have said, go to, the Bravo side, whatever it was. So sure enough, I get on scene. We leave the tower ladder about a block away, and I tell the guys, get your tools. We report in, walking towards the command post, and I see the deputy. His hands are going like this. He's like, you don't know which end is up. He sees me, goes, Danny, get that bleeping tower ladder, over here. So we lost like 10 minutes. By the time we got the cars moved out of the way and back the tower ladder in, we already lost that building. Had she asked the chief, he would have said, go to X Street and set up. We would have saved that building.
So is that something you couldn't have called him? I guess, again, I'm thinking of the hierarchy.
No, because I have to go to the dispatcher.
Yeah.
But he's listening, or his agent been listening, like, ladder so-and-so, where do you want me? And, and then, it should have been like, yeah, have them come in on this block. So again, it's communication lapse. We lost a building that we shouldn't have lost.
Yeah, that's on
a simple transmission between the dispatcher and the chief and me.
Yeah.
So again, and the sad part of it is I knew it. Like, I instinctively knew that I knew the block. I know exactly. As I'm driving there, I pictured all the buildings on that block.
Yeah, that's an odd hierarchy that you couldn't go direct to him. I guess once you got there and got on the handy talkie channel.
Yeah, there's a few things in hindsight I wish I would have done. I should have been a little more forceful and say, can you? I should have told her how to do her job. Like, can you check with the division, and see where he wants me? Or like you said, I should have got on scene and, hey, we're here. But already we lost 5 minutes.
Right.
Because I had gone right to the command post where I should have went around. So again, it's this communication, because for us, it's like seconds really count, we don't have like a half hour to figure it out. Like, oh yeah, we'll just get to it. Let's do this first,
Right.
It's like, man,
in this operational period, we'll do that.
Yeah, right. Next operational period. Yeah. We'll get that to the next time. We're working against the clock, man. It's speed. It's water on the fire, right? So, yeah, it's all about communication. So, well, I really wish Eric was here tonight. I'm sure he would have some great stories with his row frames or what are they called? The triple deckers. The triple deckers up in triple deckers in Boston. Yeah,
well, hopefully he'll watch this in his while he's recovering.
Yeah. So
give us pointers.
Yeah. All right. Well, it must have not been a fire, which I'm surprised. they were doing an investigation. I'm very surprised. Usually, when they get like that, it's usually, So, well,
good stuff, Danny.
Tony, thanks again.